should be making a video. I'll make this the Dissident Dumbass of the Week award winner is Hythloday. Now, he's not really a dissident, but his commitment is so ambiguous and undefined. His commitment to anything the real scientists say about actual causes of the effects, that, yeah, he deserves to be called a dissident in that sense. And there's clear duplicity in what he says. One minute he says he's a determinist, and the next minute he validates Feynman and Suskind's theories, which are completely anti-determinism. So it doesn't make any, it's garbage, junk. So I have requested that he actually propose a fact, that he make some statement of fact, that he actually describes something, so I could say that's either agreeable or disagreeable, and he will describe nothing. So he takes 1 hour in a video, and he doesn't actually say anything about anything real at all, except to say digital computer thingy, whatever, numbers, math, we're math, everything's math. No, everything's not math. Math is just the description of, like, velocity. Velocity is a thing. It's like moving a speed from one place to another. It's an actual event. It isn't a mathematical number in the real world. Math is a reformation of it, a symbol of it, a representation of it. It's a simplification of it, just like a word, like fast. It's simplifying something. It's describing it in some simple way. It's not describing it in any kind of technical way. So it's dumb. It's not smart. It's crude, not sophisticated. I'm seeking your more sophisticated answer to a question, the real answer. And apparently he has none. He has drawn no conclusions about anything, except he, generally speaking, likes mathematicians. I don't even know. Except can't even say that's what he's saying, because he won't say those exact words. And like there's some special formula that he particularly likes. He doesn't even point that out. I mean, it's just... It begs credulity for me to think he actually listens to his own video and says, gee, I answered his question. It's amazing how he could draw that conclusion, that somehow I would be, oh yeah, thanks, Hythloday, I get what you're saying now. No, you didn't say anything. You took an hour and you didn't say a damn thing. And you certainly didn't respond to anything I've ever said. So every argument I made about what a brain is, every time I've said anything about what logic is, what facts are, how they point, even about what I've said about how you weigh evidence. That's a function of logic, is to weigh the evidence for a story. Somebody tells you story A, somebody tells you story B. You decide based on who's got evidence for their story. Two witnesses show up. One's got a cell phone camera with pictures. The other one just has their story. Who are you going to believe? I mean, come on. Evidence, the weight of evidence is everything to the logical process. Without weighing evidence, there's no logical process. Amazing. Facts aren't important. Yeah, they are really important. Damn. Evidence. Really important. And I'll pretend I didn't say this. Evidence, really important. Anyway, so it's going to, this will be more than one part. I'll just get through some of this, because it isn't until like 17 minutes in that he starts to get to the real bullshit.
Says he doesn't know what I believe. No. Just by way of reminder.
Yes, you've made, thousands of videos, and it's just apparent that everything you say has no you don't cite anything. You just keep name dropping. Well, Professor Hootyhead says, and Kant says, and some other guy says, and this guy says, and that guy says this, and this guy says that. Never do you just come out right out and say, I say the preponderance of the evidence indicates that this is true. when do you say that?
Don't really hold much stock in the notion of first-person communicator.
Right. Whatever that even means. I don't hold much stock in the idea that we're individual brains that process the world individually and have an individual understanding of it and an individual understanding of the words and definitions and all that stuff, and it's all personal and individual. He doesn't put much stock in that. How is that even a beginning to a conversation? Well, what do you put stock in? What, that somehow it's all interconnected and somehow I'm being told by other things what to think? No, I'm stuck with just my neurons and my life experience and what I've learned and who I've listened to. That's what I'm stuck with. I don't put much stock in. God damn. I mean, it makes a difference whether somebody read 1/10 of the book or whether they read the whole book. Just like Piro's videos, right? I mean, obviously, he only absorbs 1 or 2% of a video's content. 1 or 2%. And so the likelihood of him getting a paraphrase right is very, very low.
In regards of calling myself an I, except to...
So this part has nothing to do with anything. I don't know why. I declared the I dead 7 years ago, for fuck's sake, okay? I don't have any use for the word. I've used the word my brain, that's what it is. It's a brain that's doing all this crap. My liver's not doing the thinking. My liver's not doing the feeling. My liver's not doing the calculating. My brain is. My brain made this sentence, right? I mean, my liver didn't do it. My heart didn't do it. My pancreas didn't goddamn do it. My brain goddamn did it. Fuck. What is so complicated? I have a brain. It makes sentences. It puts words together. It puts concepts together. It understands this is like this and it's unlike that. It's doing logic all the fucking time. What's so fucking complicated?
Acknowledge that it's a thoroughly useful, indoctrinated mode of speech. And therefore, I will.
So again, it's not a mode of speech. You have obviously a personal understanding. I'm seeking to understand why your brain has drawn certain conclusions. And so I need you to articulate the conclusions with some sort of specificity, to actually say something that's actually definitive. Do you believe there's a difference between the sensation of a nail in your eye and the sensation of a delicious cupcake? Well, what do you think that difference is? Do you think that difference has a qualitative element? Just overtly say, no, there is no qualitative distinction.
I will use it to best transmit this data.
And you will fail dismally. You're not going to at all do anything like what I requested, which is actually say whether you believe Heisenberg. Do you believe photons have no position? Do you believe that photons are waves, or that they turn into waves? What do you fucking believe?
In regards, this video will have 2 parts. I'll tell you what this machine is about and what it's reporting in regards of science and...
It's not reporting, that's the whole point. You're not making any reports. You're not saying anything about what it concludes. There's absolutely no information in your report. You're reporting on stuff that isn't an answer to any of the questions asked. You ask you a question, you say, I am a automaton. The dominoes fell down. That's all that happened. Dominoes fell.
So, morality.
Which, again, in the context of having a conversation with me, is just being overtly offensive. It's just overtly offensive, right? I mean, I've said it so many times. The word morality is a useless, archaic piece of shit word. Morality was always based on dogma. It has nothing to do with a value equation or applying logic to an ethical dilemma. Nothing at all. The morality is bullshit as a word. Nobody who has any understanding of this idea of making a value judgment that is honest and true, or that accurately deals with a circumstance, would use the word morality. It's a word of the religious kooks.
This machine has constructed a neural architecture.
All right, so the machine didn't do any of this constructing. So again, you know, this we can't even get off the ground in an understanding of what evolution created and what the brain does as a function. It has functions.
It seems, from learned knowledge of science.
Oh, yes, just more nonsense, an ambiguous reference. Learned knowledge of science somehow tells you that your brain doesn't have functions, that you don't have sensations, that you don't have sense organs even. You know, it's just dominoes.
Which information of science, which it is encoded in its own neural structure.
Let's understand, it's a learning machine is the first thing you could say about a brain, right? And by brain, I'm talking about a thing that can learn, right? If you can't learn, it's not a brain. So you can, that can be the standard. Can't learn, not a brain. Brains learn. And the only way they learn is by reward and punishment. So they have to essentially have sensation. So that's the starting point from my position. I'm trying to figure out, what about that can't you say yes to? That's the basic function. There's a mechanism of reward and punishment, and depending on how that mechanism is applied, will decide how the thing learns. And generally speaking, you are going to be rewarded and punished by not complying to what the world tells you need to be. It's going to be that simple. Now, we have some innate desires that have absolutely nothing to do with our choice. We didn't engineer those through our learning process. We didn't learn to find, you know, boobs worthy of boners. We didn't, you know, what we're certain impulses have nothing to do with any logic programming. They're imposed by nature.
The consistency of which.
But most of what we do through our life is learn by experience. And that's the part that's important. That's the part that makes conversation worth having, is the fact that we are educated, we are reprogrammed, we are a reprogrammed machine, and can learn better than what nature gave us.
Which causes this machine to acknowledge its own machining.
Right, nothing special about the introspection and recognizing that something's motivating me. I should look into myself and see what the fuck is really at the, what started that idea? Where did that train of thought come from? Where did, you know, so yes, that's a fundamentally logical process, is the curiosity.
That is, this machine has formulated, has evolved over time such that its neural connectome.
So I'm supposed to accept neural connecton. So we can't say brain. Now we have to say something stupid like neural connecton. I have no interest in calling thinking neural connecton. I'll agree with you that it's a process of bits. It's essentially a computer hardware, and that's all that it is. I'll argue that yes, that's true, but clearly it's 100 billion of them, and it's really complex what it produces. The byproduct of the massive complexity of the matrix inside our brain clearly has emergent functions that merit 100 billion neurons. It's not knee-jerk. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Others might say about it that it's constructed parts of that connectome that are...
Clearly, the brain has lots of little organs and lots of different forms or functions of cells that are processing and filtering. Just like your liver is a filter, your heart is doing a certain thing, takes input in, creates output out. Everything's an input-output kind of device intended to do a certain job. Just like a car engine has a bunch of little parts, and most of them are pretty simple. They're just doing a simple thing, like saying pressure's too high, do this. If this, do that. If that, do this. Pretty much the same basic idea. A bunch of little parts that create different little functions, and overall it has an emergent function, which is it's making noise and it's creating potential energy.
Consistent. Whilst it's very much a discrete network and purely a digital connectome, in the sense that each neuron digitally fires.
Yes, so it's discrete, that is, it's contained, it's in one place, it's one individual calculator. Each calculator is being reprogrammed by its environment. That is, if one's in a humid environment, it starts adding things a certain way. If it's in a dry environment, it starts adding things a certain way. So you can just think of it as we're just little calculators, and we're all in different environments, and depending on our environment, because we can learn, we will be changed by our environment. The programming will change.
I'll forego the strained articulation about speaking of this machine's connectome.
So somehow it's a strained conversation to attempt to explain, basic functions, and what the damn thing produces. There's nothing strained in it. I mean, we are experiencing it. We don't have to strain very hard to say, I have senses, okay? And basically they are tactile in a sense that they are feely. They create a ooh, ooh, ooh feeling or a ow, ow, ow kind of feeling. They're either obnoxious, uncomfortable, bad, or they're pleasant and attractive. So they're either repulsive or attractive. There's either excessive pressure or a relaxation in pressure. High pressure, reduction in pressure. And the reduction feels good and the high pressure feels bad. That can be observed as a fact. And you're saying that fact is not observable because the only things that can observe it are things that are conscious. So he says it's not a fact because only conscious things can experience it. So therefore we can never acknowledge it exists because it's dependent on being conscious to see its existence. You can't see the feeling unless you have it. You have to have one to know one. But he says you knowing it by experiencing it is invalid information. That can't be used as a fact. So your own experience can't be used as a fact. That's retarded. That's more retarded than Heisenberg. this idiotic standard that you're not allowed to derive information through the fact that your senses can see, and no sense you can't see. If I don't have eyes and I'm blind, I can't see. And so now he's saying, well, any information you get because you can see is invalid because you used a sense organ to see. Yeah, I did. How's that a violation? How does that make me dumber? How does that make my testimony invalid when my eyes work?
I'll supplant the word programming, since all digital functions can be programmed. All digital
and again, but it's an inadequate and insufficient word to describe. You don't call the parts on a car program devices. You understand that they're filters. They have functions, and the programs are functional. So again, you're taking away their functionality by giving them some, well, they're just software. No, well, they do have a function. Most programs are made out of functions. That's what the whole thing works based on, is the word function. Now, what word says more? The word function or the word program? Well, I'd say the word function. Now, when I say the word program, I'm assuming the person understands that programs contain functions. But this guy, no.
Functions
use the word.
have a digital binary representation in terms.
Well, it's not a representation. It's not a binary representation. It's the actual physical thing that's producing the output. So it's not representing something in terms of when it's doing just a program that doesn't require any evaluation or logical process. So when it's not doing math, when it's not weighing evidence, weighing it on scales, doing math, okay, then it's just then it's just a knee-jerk. Then it's just a program stream. But clearly, when it has to do a function, okay, that means it has to process it. Not that that's not going to be just as deterministic, but I'm just saying it's clearly a different process.
Of information, I'll move now my mode of communication into talking about the programming of this machine.
So again, it's kind of a waste to talk about a program that's being rewritten every millisecond. Every millisecond I'm changing as a program. So you can't call it the program or something like that, because that wouldn't make much sense. Because the program is the information that I possess. The world my calculator has been exposed to, and how that exposure changes it every second. It's not a static program.
But in truth, it hasn't been programmed. It hasn't got a program in the thoroughgoing sense that computing might understand it.
Right, well, because computers aren't self-programming. Now, I'm sure somebody's playing with that idea. I mean, I've always had, if I had the, if I could be more than one person and spend time doing something, it seems quite obvious that that's the way to create a more human-like program, is to have the capacity to rewrite the program. So to have one program that rewrites the other program, give this program the right to rewrite that program, then it can evolve, then it can change.
So this program acknowledges, does not defend science's misguided.
All right, does not defend science is misguided. Now, when he's saying that, he doesn't mean all of science. He doesn't mean anything like that. He means the particular scientist he doesn't like. That's what he means, right? So I'm just giving you forewarning. He doesn't mean he doesn't like what science is saying. He likes what 5 scientists are saying. He doesn't like what the 95 are saying.
emphasis on lay speak. Yeah.
All right, so more nonsense. This lay speak. They make overt assertions. They're not lay speaking when they say, the two black holes collided and 4 solar masses were converted into virtual energy in the form of bent space. They're making assertions, okay? They're not doing lay speak. They're making assertions about what exists in reality. So he's pretending that science doesn't make any assertions and that the scientists don't. Just because Feynman and Susskind copped out and said we don't want to bother thinking about causes or mechanisms. We just want to do mathematics, equations. And the mathematics isn't even complicated, so there isn't even any quantum mechanics to their math. Because there's no such thing as the math of quantum mechanics. It doesn't exist. So this whole thing he's saying is such a crock of shit.
Science, this machine has found, actually makes claims that its best theory is mathematics.
So it makes claims that its best theory is mathematics. And so he's saying that even though I haven't seen where they've said that. Could you show me the who says it and why should I believe them when the rest of them are making all kinds of claims about physical reality? They're claiming Huygens is a real thing. They're claiming Heisenberg is a real thing. They're not claiming it's mathematical. They're claiming it's physically real, that the photon doesn't have a position. What's your position on position? Do things have a position in space or don't they?
Mathematical and has no physical meaning.
So it's just idiotic, right? So you're telling me a physicist has decided that there's no... Clearly math has utility. If you want to be somebody who can make storage devices that don't blow up, in tanks or something, or you want a building that doesn't fall down, clearly you have to know mathematics and you have to be able to do the engineering part of the science. But we're talking about theoretical science, and we're talking about the science that gets to drawing conclusions about whether there is a Big Bang or wasn't a Big Bang, whether there was expansion or there wasn't expansion, whether the universe is getting bigger or the universe is getting smaller, whether the universe will die a heat death or it won't die a heat death. That's the subject of physics in any kind of real sense of a conversation. The mathematical part is engineering. So again, the fact that in the practical universe, it's like the difference when you go to art school or something, the real course is going to be, well, learn how to use Photoshop so you can get a job. Okay, yeah, creativity is great, but this is the hardware skill you have to have. So the mathematics has utility as you need a job, jackass. You actually have to be able to do something valuable. Speculating about whether there was a Big Bang or not, guess what? That's not going to do anybody any good. No one's going to pay you to do that. Fuck. So clearly, physics education has nothing to do with the focusing on causes. It has to do with making yourself useful as a technician.
He's seen enough figureheads.
So he calls them figureheads. So that's a pejorative statement, right? Isn't it? Figurehead, that's a pejorative. But he's defending them.
Allude to this and state that the true level of knowledge that humanity has come to in terms of understanding the fundamentals of the workings of reality is that reality, whatever it may be,
so at least we have that out of him, whatever it may be. So he is basically saying, I have no opinion. I don't understand reality. I can't tell you what reality is. I can't tell you what I think it is, what I think the evidence indicates. Whatever it is, that's what he's bought into, that somehow it's a whatever. It's not a whatever. There's an actual thing that's happening in the universe, and I think understandable. I think it's quite accessible to understand it because of the information we do have.
Forms to a mathematical theory.
Right, so there is no mathematical theory called quantum mechanics. It's just a lie, okay? There's no mathematical theory. You have the Schrodinger equation, which clearly doesn't define where the variables come from, in the sense the most important variable, sine theta, okay, the angle, the end product of the whole equation is the sine theta. Once you have that, all of the rest of it is just addition and multiplication. There's nothing complicated. There's no woo in that formula at all. The woo is in defining where the sine theta came from.
Quantum mechanics.
So again, this is just such bullshit. So he's saying somehow he believes in quantum mechanics, and yet he won't define what the fuck that means at all. And we know that just go to a different physicist and you'll get a different explanation of what the foundation of quantum mechanics is. They all rely on certain experiments, and that's where the joke is, because I've pointed out the ones they rely on are false and fake and phony all over the place. The logic doesn't add up at all. Their evidence sucks. And then they make up fake evidence, and he calls that, well, they're just doing that for the dumbos in the audience. They're just lying to the dumbos for some reason. For some reason, they have such a great story to tell that they have to break it and glorify it and fake it. Why do they have to do all that crap? Why do they have to be dishonest? Why do they have to be inaccurate? Why do they need to be inaccurate for lay people to understand? That doesn't make any fucking sense. No, they're using these arguments as evidence, and they're not evidence. They're fake. They're trying to prove that it's true by telling you fake stories. So it's like me saying angels push electrons. That's going to be my theory. And I say to you, well, look, I can convince you, okay? Because I have photographs. You know, we took photographs of the angels, and we have pictures of their actual wings flapping. Okay, we don't have pictures of their faces or their halos, but we have a picture of their wings. No problem. And then you ask me, well, where's your pictures? I say, well, you know, they're on the internet. Or so, I mean, it's out there. Google it. Google angel wing photon. It's out there. Trust me. And he says that's just being helpful to the layperson. So I just told a preposterous lie. I have no fucking photographs. I got no fucking evidence. I've just tried to convince them that something's real by citing evidence that doesn't exist. And he says that's just what you do for lay people. That's how you help educate them. It's by lying. There's nothing else here. He's not saying anything here. This is just nothing.
Which makes no effort in itself. Richard Feynman says, it's mathematical. I can tell you the mathematics. That's really strange.
Right. And it's not mathematical, okay, in the sense that it's just statistics and probability. You could illustrate it with a pie chart. I mean, Feynman uses a little spinning wheel to make the point that time has everything to do with what position it'll end up, and that's the randomizer. Time is what's causing the idea of random, because the thing spins 1,000,000 times in a second. So it makes it look random because of how many permutations are taking place in one single second. So just like the dice roll, there's so many variables in the tiny amount of time that the dice are active that there's no, like, each one is playing against the other. So there can be nothing, any consistency that could possibly exist, or any pattern that could exist, is going to get broken because the patterns are not harmonic. They're destructively interfering with each other, essentially, and destroying any semblance of order. So it ends up appearing random. And again, that's all they're doing. They're just looking, again, for every experiment they change the formula. When they're doing glass layers don't create any kind of disproportional angle. They go right through a cycle. So they go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 all the way up to 16, and then they start back at 0 again. So it's just like a clock. 12 o'clock, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 o'clock, 1, 2, 3, 4, instead of 16. So you just have 16 hours in the clock. What is quantum mechanical about that? Oh, absolutely nothing. That's just a cycle. There's no quantum mechanics in that. There's no other woo in that. The math has no woo in it. It's the stuff, the causes of the effect is where their woo is.
But in truth, I can't tell you the mechanics of it.
Okay, so that's, I guess, the only obvious statement here. He's with the Feynman group. I can't tell you any mechanics. I can't explain to you why the slit width would vary, why that would change, how the light diffracts. I can't tell you anything because they have no model of the reality. They don't know whether the photon is a wave or a particle. They don't know what it's doing at all. They have no concept of it. They have no working model. They can't draw a picture of it. So obviously they can't diagram what it's doing in any kind of rational way. But when they attempt to, you clearly see that they turn it into something that looks like water waves, even though we have no medium. They don't claim to believe in an ether, so they pretend that there's some force field that's doing the same thing as an ether. I mean, it's just vacuous mush, totally inconsistent. So he says, I believe in QM. What? What does that mean? By whose definition?
Leonard Susskind, in his course, his most thoroughgoing course, entitled Quantum Entanglements, but really it's quantum mechanics.
Right. So entanglement is another complete woo fable. The word entanglement is not a mathematical term. Okay, there's nothing mathematical about the word entanglement. So don't pretend they're not citing an actual fact. They're claiming the photons are entangled. They're claiming something. Do you think that claim is justified by evidence, is my assertion to you? Do you think there's sufficient evidence to draw any conclusion about how photons are instantaneously connected to each other by some special mechanism? Do you think there's sufficient evidence to have any confidence that that's a fact? So here he says the word entanglement. What does entanglement have to do with math?
Whereby he sees that understanding the notion of quantum entanglement is a most important aspect of the journey. But he says, really, it's just mathematics.
Right, but it can't be just mathematics because there has to be some kind of evidence to indicate there's a reason to believe it. And then you start getting into all the reasons they believe it, the experiments that indicate it, right? And we know how flawed those experiments are. So, you're pretending they know what polarization is. You're pretending they know how much a polarization filter affects the thing that goes through it. You're pretending you think they know for sure that two photons pop out of an atom, okay, left and right with opposite polarization. You think all of that is solid fact. And I'm arguing clearly it's not been demonstrated to be a solid fact at all. It's a story. I mean, claiming,
the rest after that is all where he does try to impart understanding and intuitions about it.
Okay, some more bullshit about this intuition shit. No, this is just an argument. When you're defending a client in court or you're prosecuting, so again, you don't like this. It's so bizarre that you involve yourself in legal matters as if you think this is an appropriate way to deal with a problem, and yet you have no respect for the process. The process is to present evidence. And all I've been saying from the beginning is, the evidence is so pathetically weak. And then sometimes, actually, when in court, they'll sit there and do this silly stuff where they say, well, go look at the pictures of the angel wings. They'll cite evidence that doesn't exist. And you're pretending that's not what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to convince dumbasses that they actually have evidence because they actually tried to detect a photon, or they tried to detect an electron, or they tried to detect a buckyball. and that it actually got narrower. That by trying to detect it, the pattern got more precise, in violation of Heisenberg. So in complete violation of Heisenberg, by trying to detect, the pattern got narrower. That's how illogical they are. They are so off the plantation. They're way they're gone. They've left the rational building because they can't even have it. Their story has such overt inconsistencies in it. And you just keep pretending those are okay. Those aren't inconsistencies. They're profound inconsistencies.
Just like so many other physicists, but in this case better, because he takes time to emphasize the mathematical nature, just like Richard Feynman.
So again, he takes time to emphasize the mathematical nature of QM. There's no mathematical nature of it. It's all based on premises. There's no sine theta without the premise of wave interference. That's a fact. The equation wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for the analogy of waves. And that's why it breaks down so obviously, in the sense that, yes, they don't even realize that when they apply the equation to the two different circumstances, a single slit and a double slit, that the only thing that stays the same is the distance. So the distance between the surfaces, not the distance between an opening. So the openings have nothing to do with this, in the sense that you can logically deduce, well, why is this variable changing from the thickness of an impediment from the width of a slit? Why are those two variables the same? Well, the only reason why they're the same is because they have to do with the distance between two surfaces, which is kind of overtly telling you what the real cause of the effect is. Another argument you've completely ignored.
We'll find on small instances, most of the talking heads refer to this mathematical nature.
So that's just more nonsense. They refer to actual effects, that the thing doesn't have a position, a real position in space. They make actual assertions about the physical reality. They either claim it's a wave, or they can claim it's a non-formed, ill-formed perturbation in fields. Fields, undefined mush fields of nothing, of whatever, of blah, 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 virtual, blah, 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 blah. But to pretend that quantum mechanics is a mathematical construct is just bullshit. It's just statistics. How the fuck can you just sit there with a straight face and tell me statistics is quantum mechanics? Bullshit.
But it's about 1% of the discussion. That in actual fact, we have no concrete understanding, mechanical understanding.
So again, so he's putting himself in their group, I presume. I mean, because you don't understand, or because Feynman doesn't understand, doesn't mean that other people aren't gaining some kind of understanding or have some understanding. So that's just more nonsense, okay? Because you gave up on a material universe doesn't mean other people have, and doesn't mean their theories fail in any particular way that you've pointed out in any dramatic way.
Of the universe, only the mathematics.
Yes, again, there is no mathematics. So again, the citation to mathematics, go write the formulas down that are the mathematics of quantum mechanics, and I'll show you all the variables in those formulas that only have definition if you believe in a whole pile of mush that created that variable. What creates the sine theta, Hythloday? Where did it come from? What's the formula that creates the sine theta?
Now, I criticize science's emphasis and lack of informing the public of this mathematical nature.
So again, why would they inform the public of a mathematical nature that they can't articulate? They can't explain how, oh no, this doesn't really have anything to do with causes, it just has to do with probability statistics. We watch the dice bounce off all the crap and land, and then we say, well, it sure does bounce off a lot of crap, and it makes it so it's kind of synthetically random. I mean, it appears to us to be random because the dice are bouncing off enough crap that we can't figure it out. That's all they're going to say. They're not going to even hope to explain to you, oh, no. There's physical things that actually happen. The dice they don't disappear. They don't pop in and out of existence. They don't do any of that crap. They move in kind of straight lines, forces. But the real forces happen. They bounce off the felt. The felt has a certain elasticity, blah, 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 blah. I mean, this is just horse shit. Quantum mechanics is full of woo as its foundation. Its foundation is wave-particle duality. Its foundation is Heisenberg. Its foundation now is entanglement. All things for which there's absolutely no credible evidence demonstrating them to be true.
So whenever they speak about electrons going through two slots, yeah, there's the fact that many figureheads have said that it's all mathematical.
Again, a lie. Okay, the figureheads don't say that, so that's just horse shit again. And again, it's Feynman's cop-out. So, and play it to its end. I just played the Susskind clip where he basically said it breaks determinism. He said it. And Feynman said the same thing. Well, you don't like it? Tough. Yeah, the world's run by angels. You don't like it? Tough. He says it. He's making an overt claim that there's no determinism because you can't redo the set. You can't set up the universe the same way and it won't run the same way because there's some sort of magical thing that's going to happen.
What they mean is this is just blah 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 to make amenable to a lay public certain concepts without divulging the mathematical nature.
Well, go ahead, divulge it for us then, okay? They didn't divulge it, you divulge it for me then. What's the mathematical, where is it? Show me this, mathematics of quantum mechanics. Show me the math of quantum mechanics that doesn't have fucking wave crap in it.
Which doesn't support that intuitive physical claim or particular dialogue.
Again, more bullshit about something intuitive. The whole point of them talking about is how it's supposed to be completely unintuitive and the universe works that way and so tough because it doesn't work logically. It doesn't work sensibly. The smallest thing in the universes are the only things doing all this magical special stuff, and none of the big stuff ever do it. None of the stuff we can take a picture of ever do this funky crap. No, only the stuff we can't take a picture of. This is so UFO. This is so 1950s UFO bullshit. Fake a photograph, fool everybody. Okay, maybe someday we'll get to the point where, oh yeah, with cell phones and all that kind of crap now, nobody can get away with that horse shit.
Yeah, and each figurehead who discusses quantum mechanics and tries to impart, should I say, physical visualizations to quantum mechanics.
Well, clearly they're doing that. Yes, clearly there's professors that are teaching it, like Lewin, who are teaching it because they believe Huygens is really happening. They believe this is a real function, that photons are turned into little wavicles and the wavicles interfere with each other. It's their real theory. That's what quantum mechanics means to them. That's the definition of quantum mechanics, is that function.
Usually has taken a particular, what you call quantum interpretation, to his heart, and this prejudices every analogy, metaphor, and physical intuition he tries to...
Again, this has nothing to do with physical intuition. It has to do with evidence. What is there evidence for? Is there evidence that new universes are created? Oh no, that's completely untestable mush. Is there evidence that photons have radar? No, that's untestable mush. I mean, their theories are all untestable mush, and there's absolutely no evidence that any one of those theories is the correct answer.
To give you, this is well understood. The fact that there be
it's an absolute, again, this is just bullshit to say this is well understood when each physicist is telling inconsistent stories about what the facts are, what experiments have been done, what evidence has been compiled. So it is just so bullshit to sit there and say, we all understand this. No, they don't all understand this. They fundamentally disagree with each other. And the fact is they've all agreed not to disagree. They've all agreed not to challenge each other and call each other idiots. The end. I mean, Professor Lewin said something as stupid as there's two voltages in the same location, and a guy comes out and basically tries to politely correct him and say, no, you're just your probes are fucked. They're in the experiment. They're getting fucked by the experiment. And he couldn't even do that without everybody going hysterical. How can you challenge Faraday and Lewin and blah, blah? Like Faraday would have disagreed. I think Faraday would have said to the electric boom guy, way to go, good catch.
Quantum interpretations that are all about that aspect of quantum mechanics.
What aspect? Again, so again, he hasn't said a damn thing about a damn thing. He's just implied that there's some special math somewhere that's quantum mechanics, and that we don't have to worry about all these assertions they make about wave-particle duality or entanglement or almost time dilation of photons. We don't have to worry about all the assertions they make about what happens to a photon when it goes through this stupid experiment. And it's not even when obviously I'm saying it wrong, because quantum mechanics doesn't believe something happens to the photon. Quantum mechanics believes the photon is loopy, intrinsically loopy.
And so, figureheads of science are remiss in not first placing on the...
Who are the figureheads you're talking about? I mean, 1 minute you're talking about Feynman and Susskind. Who are you talking about? Lewin and somebody else? You're so inspecific. Who are the figureheads? Is Susskind a figurehead? Is Feynman a figurehead? Who are the figureheads?
Table their prejudice as to that they have a whole doctrine point of view in these metaphors that they are going to give to.
They're not metaphors. They're citation of experiments. They're not metaphors, for fuck's sake. It's not a metaphor. Wave-particle duality is not a metaphor. Wave interference is not a metaphor. It's a claim, for fuck's sake. Entanglement is not a metaphor. It's a fucking claim.
When in fact it's equally tenable that there are 30 other legitimate positions which can be
Yeah, there's even more than that, because obviously if you're going to allow people to say angel wings, well then you can say gremlin wings, and then you can say pixie wings, and you can say leprechaun shamrock wings.
Can stand with equal authority to his analogies, purely because...
Again, they're not analogies, they're assertions. So again, he just keeps pretending that they're analogizing it to multiverses. No, they're not analogizing to multiverses, they're claiming their existence.
Because they all stand on a pure mathematical idea.
Oh, so again, no pure mathematics in this at all. Again, I've already shown how the mathematics doesn't even predict the photon experiment. It doesn't even accurately describe what it does. And especially in the two-slit experiment, certainly the Schrodinger equation falls far short of describing the actual pattern. It clearly doesn't duplicate water wave interference when there's two slits. It doesn't duplicate it because water waves don't create two patterns. He is such a shyster, you know. I mean, you know, it is funny. He thinks he's getting unfairly treated by the legal system, but you're just such a lying shyster. You're so fucking evasive. You're playing such games. Here you are defending people who are basically lying to people, deceiving them with nonsense, claiming they have some reason to believe they're bullshit, and making up fake experiments that were never conducted as evidence that, see, we did it. We kind of figured this out, that there's no reversibility. We tested reversibility. Susskind talks as if he retested it by reversing it. He never tested it. He never proved it with any evidence. He's just claiming it. It's a claim. And claims require evidence. And they don't have any.
This can be brought to a concrete example to understand when in the two-slit experiment you get much talk of a quantum entity going through one slit or the other slit. Yeah. Now, the truth is, and that teaching mode.
Yeah, and the only reason why you're trying to figure out which slit is to figure out whether it went through both slits, and that's the thing you're trying to eliminate as the possibility. So you're trying to narrow what kind of wackiness you're allowed to believe in by saying, okay, well, if we detect it in one slit, then that's what it went through, one slit. So we can't keep doing this. The photon split in two and went through two slits.
It might have some virtue.
So he says this is a concrete example of something. Their description of the slit experiment is a concrete example of bullshit, of shyster at court, lying about evidence. It's the OJ trial. It's let's lie about the evidence.
But it's overemphasized, way overemphasized, because the supporting truth of the theory is that the theory makes no claim of any sort.
All right, preposterous nonsense. Clearly, quantum mechanics makes a whole bunch of claims. Entanglement, interference, these are all part of the claims made. This is just such bullshit to say it doesn't make any claims. The whole fucking thing is made out of claims. You can't get the variables to put into the equations unless you understand the claims being made. You can't get a sine theta. You can't make the sine theta that's in the fucking formula without the claims to create it.
It just makes the predictions. It says, tell me what kind of setup you have. If this setup is such that you could extract information and say that the particle went through one or the other, then you get one kind of distribution.
Right, so now he's arguing the Heisenberg nonsense, that somehow there's an intrinsic resistance built into the photon's function that makes it impossible. If you try to measure velocity, then you lose location. And if you try to measure location, you lose velocity, or directional momentum, which is just a physical fact of interfering with something. That's what's going to happen when you interfere with anything. So, but their postulate is that this is intrinsic, that there's no such thing as a subtle interaction. And clearly, there is no such thing as a subtle interaction that we can interpret with a photon. So yes, that's true. It has to hit an electron or we don't know it exists. That's just a fucking fact. It doesn't mean that the photon is Heisenberging. The evidence doesn't prove the claim. The evidence doesn't prove the claim. The evidence doesn't prove the claim.
And if the setup makes no, not even in principle, that's the point, in principle, if the setup cannot determine or and be actually measuring in an intrinsic sense which it went through, then you get an entirely different probabilistic distribution.
Right, and this is the one they cite the fake evidence to support. They claim evidence that doesn't exist to imply that somehow they've tested the theory. They haven't tested the theory. There's no test of the theory. There's no experiment demonstrating that this nonsense has anything to do with reality. No evidence. Zero evidence. Yet they're claiming, they're implying the existence of evidence. How is that not a crime against honesty and integrity? They're lying about the true evidence by creating fake evidence or the impression of the existence of fake evidence.
What this theory also says is, in regards of a situation of two slits, is part of this theory, this mathematical theory.
Again, it's not a mathematical theory, just horseshit. The math is dirt simply stupid as an equation. It all depends on how you think the variables are derived, where they come from, and the only variable that really decides the whole game is the sine theta.
An implication of it is that you cannot aim quantum entities.
Yes, so more assertion, not proven by facts. Now, the fact that we don't have the technology yet to do something doesn't mean it can't be done. So this is like some asshole, 500 years ago saying men will never fly. It's just a lie, right? They have no evidence that they'll never be able to do it. They have no reason to believe it can never happen. They have no indication that it's impossible, and yet they're stating it. And this is exactly the same circumstance. There's absolutely no reason to believe that claim. That claim is not founded in evidence. It's just their assertion. It's a fucking, what do you call it? A blind assertion? A blank assertion? An empty bag assertion? It's just an assertion with no fucking reasoning to defend it. And when they attempt to reason a defense for it, they make up fake evidence. That's the clear facts I've demonstrated. And you're such a liar to deny that that's exactly what I've done. Fuck. Just on the idea of this aiming photons, right? So he's making the assertion that, yeah, that seems plausible, that we can't aim a photon. Now, clearly they are making more and more precise lasers. Now, I don't know. So if somebody, I mean, I can't be an expert on everything. What is the smallest diameter laser that we have technically now? Because I'm pretty sure it's probably pretty small. And I'm pretty sure they've gotten it down to maybe a 0.5 millimeter, which would be all you need, to do these slit experiments. Because you can get the pattern with a half millimeter slit. Not a 0.5 millimeter, sorry, wrong. 1/10 of a millimeter. 1/10. Well, anyway, let's just say 1/10 of a millimeter. A 1/10 millimeter slit will give you a pattern, a double slit pattern. It won't have both things in it, I don't think. But anyway, it'll be a pattern. And so you could aim the laser through the slit if you have a 1/10 of a millimeter laser beam. So if the smallest diameter laser has a 1/10 of a millimeter beam, then you could direct it, aim it into one slit, then the other slit, then one slit, then the other slit, do a time exposure, and see if you get the pattern. If you get the pattern, then we're done with this Heisenberg horse shit, aren't we?
Because to be able to aim them is to have an experimental setup, which is, in effect, with precision, measuring them.
So that's just another horseshit accusation that somehow there's no way to develop a bit of electronics. So I would argue that the reason why we can't aim them now is because electrons are constantly being Brownian motioned, and they're always in different positions when they eject photons. So you can't reliably know whether they're at 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It's all blended in. So maybe in a super cooled environment or some other environment, you could have electrons that are more stable, and when they shoot the photon, they'll always shoot it in a straight parallel lines. So clearly I think the technology can be derived where you can take the noise out of the system. And if you take the noise out of the system, none of this variability will ruin your precision. And there'll be no rule that says you can't have a tiny stream of photons coming out of just a few electrons.
And that destroys the former claim, you see, or runs contrary to the former claim.
So clearly at least he's acknowledging there's claims. This isn't just mathematics, there's claims involved, and that these claims are clearly what I'm disputing are these claims. I don't care that mathematics is crude, in my opinion, probably underdeveloped. Okay, they haven't figured out all the variables that are actually affecting it, so they're probably the equations probably need more stuff in them because they're really not getting all the variables that are causing the effect. But anyway, they're undeveloped. But they're not the definition of quantum mechanics. The definition of quantum mechanics is the claims quantum mechanics makes.
Back in the early days, and still, draft science used to try to posit that all that is needed is better aiming without.
I didn't posit that that's all. I'm saying that clearly if we could aim photons, then we can end this whole stupid conversation about what slit it went through, because I'm going to guarantee you, frankly, all right, that if you aim the photons into the slit and you do it nice and random, you synthetically randomize their location, you'll create exactly the same pattern. It won't change the pattern any.
Taking on board the nature of the theory is part of the theory. Part of the claim is you can't aim quantum entities.
And my claim is there's no evidence defending that claim. That claim has no supporting evidence. Shit. I mean, how, and I want to know what you believe. So you believe in something that has no supporting evidence. I just want you to affirm that you're one of the idiots who fell for this bullshit made-up story. So let me know. Do you believe Heisenberg is correct? Do you believe that there's something intrinsically preventing us from aiming a photon? Do you believe it's impossible? Make your fucking claim. And so I can point out how you're making it based on zero evidence. It's a fucking religious statement.
And inspect this feature of the change of probability distribution.
So there is no inspecting this feature. That's exactly the experiment they've never done. So again, this is more horse shit. You're implying that there's been some inspection or there's some kind of this feature is known and understood. No, it's been completely ignored and just accepted as an axiom, as a fact, when it's not a fact.
Claims that they've not done enough trying to aim is anybody who endorses the theory isn't looking to try to improve the aim.
Again, but it wouldn't matter whether they were trying to improve the aim. What they should be trying to do is validate their theory. And the way to validate it is to aim the fucking photons and then prove that there's no pattern. So don't tell me they have no incentive to actually produce a piece of evidence validating their horseshit. So this is like saying, well, the fact that they've all accepted that photons are bent by gravity means they don't have to repeat the Eddington experiment. Well, that's only because they think they can get away with having no evidence, because everybody else is falling for it. So as long as everybody falls for it, as long as all the assholes like you say, yeah, don't bother getting the evidence, I don't care. I'll believe it without evidence. So as long as you people keep falling for it, they don't have to produce evidence.
Because it's somebody who wants to pull the theory down in that particular sense actually needs to show that they can aim the quantum entities.
Well, we already know we can aim them in the sense that we can confine photons fairly reliably in things like lasers. So we're already aiming them to some point. So obviously you're just saying that, what, there's some point we can't aim them any further. Well, I'm saying how far is that point? What is the smallest diameter laser beam in existence?
And undermine the postulates of quantum mechanics.
Yeah, and I think it's easily done. Obviously it should be done well, not amateurishly. And the fact is it's not done, not for the reason you cite. I say it's not done because they're afraid of that they're not going to be able to prove their theory correct. Again, this stupid gravitational lensing shit has been around for 100 years, and they haven't made one effort to make a satellite that can look next to the sun and prove it.
Which are, when you're aiming, you get this distribution. When you're not aiming, you get the other distribution.
Look, and the whole point of aiming came up, right, because nobody else ever even talked about it, right? They kept talking about detecting photons, which is impossible, right? So that's the argument I'm making. That was perfectly lucid and sensible argument. Okay, so here's your dilemma. You can't detect which slit the photon went through. But if you aim the photons, then you solve the problem, because now you're not going to have to interfere with them. They're not going to disturb them. They can go through their slit without any interference by you to detect. So I'm saying, yes, aiming fixes the problem. And now he's making excuses why they can't do aiming. I mean, it always just comes down to, let's just keep making excuses for why you can't do an experiment to actually prove your bullshit.
Because essentially measurement at the slit is like ensuring aimingness, right?
Well, it's not ensuring aimingness. It's completely a different function. It would be much better to aim them than to disturb them later in their path. So, and again, we haven't had any evidence that they can't aim an electron. We don't have any evidence that they can't aim the buckyballs. So why don't we show me the evidence that says you can't make those things move straight enough to get through one slit or the other?
Now then, so something which is very much
and I also came up with another experiment where you don't need to aim them. Just have the laser beam shoot the beam. The point would be have the two lasers shoot rays of light to a angled prism, a 90-degree angle, and shoot the laser into the slits. So I think I came up with another experiment that could prove the point, which is if you have that precisely lined up, the light from one laser can't get through the slit, and the light from the other laser can't get through the other slit. So the two lasers will go through individual slits. And I'm telling you, you're still going to get the pattern.
Annoying to draft science is when Professor Al-Khalili...
Okay, no. Every single professor, I've played every single one of them. See, this is his misparaphrases that are so annoying. So, it's not just Al-Khalili. No, it's Feynman, it's Susskind, it's Lewin, it's the guy at fucking Yale. Every single professor I've found does the same wrong analogies and it just makes overtly wrong statements about how the single slit and the double slit patterns function. Every single one of them. Find me one that's saying it right. Please, link me to the professor that describes the double slit experiment accurately. One of them. Just fucking one of them. Show me one of them that goes from single slit to double slit with any consistency at all. Show me one, because I haven't found one yet. Not one. Every single one of them tells the same fucking lie. Because that's the lie they were taught. And you goddamn know that's the reason it exists. No one's thought about it. No one cared to critique their professor. No one cared to say to Professor Lewin, that doesn't make any sense. There's 2 voltages in one location. What the fuck are you talking about? That's retarded. No one had the balls to say that can't be right.
Would say rather flippantly to make the point.
So they all said rather flippantly that, oh, it just makes a lump over here and it just makes a lump over there. I'll just pretend single slits don't do what we know they do since Newton 400 fucking years ago. We'll just pretend we didn't learn anything 400 fucking years ago. I mean, what a lie. They're using it as evidence.
To understand this rather abstract claim of quantum mechanics, he would say that...
So they have an abstract claim they're defending with fraudulent evidence, with misdescriptions of the factual history and reality. That's okay with you. I mean, just such horseshit. This is such fucking bullshit from anybody who wants justice in the world. This is such a kangaroo court of crap. I mean, you just don't deserve, you deserve nothing rational from the world because you give it nothing rational. This is an irrational defense of deception.
Have a machine looking at the slits, and it's the former distribution, and then I unplug the machine, and it's the second distribution.
A clearly false claim. Never done, shouldn't be implied that it was ever done, and it is implied that it was done for the purpose of supporting the theory. It's not an incidental mistake. It's not just fluffy talk. It's just not, oh, you have some poetic license. It's poetic license to make up a fake experiment as evidence. No, that's not anything but a clear fucking fraud.
But this is merely a story, a teaching vehicle.
A teaching vehicle is to distort the historical record and to cite experiments that weren't conducted. That's a teaching tool. No, it isn't. That's a fraud. That's fake. That's like what all the Christians do. That's fake evidence.
To try
to persuade people that there's reason to believe the horse shit.
And again, it's to be left alone without the mathematical context.
So the mathematical context. They're making assertions and direct claims, and then he goes back to talking about mathematical bullshit. They're making direct claims that somehow the photon is doing this and this and this and this. It's having effects. There's actual events taking place. This has nothing to do with some fucking mathematical horse shit. It has to do with direct claims they're making about how photons function.
An understanding of quantum mechanics, it's a very dangerous teaching thing.
So in 1 minute it's a teaching tool, next minute it's a dangerous teaching tool? I don't think dangerous teaching tool, I think that's like oxymoronic. It's a fraud.
Overuse without reminding that it's just an analogy.
It's not just an analogy. So again, this is just horseshit. It's being proposed to be evidence. It's like the cement footprint in the OJ trial. They're trying to sneak in fake things as real things. That's clearly what they're doing. This is just such a bullshit defense of a clear effort to deceive. They're clearly trying to persuade you that there is reason, that there is logic, that there is evidence supporting their bullshit.
So a second example is that I've not spoken to explicitly, but Inman repeatedly wishes to know about a beam splitter's function and why a half-silvered mirror doesn't act in the same way that we postulate to.
I'm claiming it does act the same way. So again, it's just perversion of the reality. I'm claiming it does act exactly that way, and the truth is when it acts exactly like a bunch of single slits, it's exactly predictable that it'll create the ringed pattern. That's exactly why the ringed pattern exists in the fucking experiment. It's because you've basically created a diffraction gradient, and that's why there's a ringed pattern. You shot a round laser into a diffraction gradient, and now you've gotten a ringed pattern. That's not a huge surprise.
Slits, yeah, and let's say two slits creates chaos in understanding. Why don't we get that in the? And the reason is, I would suggest, is that you have to ask yourself, what does quantum mechanics say about that situation?
It doesn't say anything, okay? They don't say anything. They can't even commit to whether the interference is... What would happen if I put a single photons into the interferometer? Do we have that experiment somewhere? Have they done the experiment? A basic experiment, a guy did it in France, whatever, with the two-slit experiment 100 and some fucking years ago. How come they haven't done that fucking experiment? Why don't they put single photons into an interferometer and see whether they get a pattern or not? They haven't even figured out whether this is multiple photons interfering with each other or whether this is a single photon that takes both paths and interferes with itself. We have no explanation for how the fucking thing works at all. And here you are making rationalizations. I mean, it's just amazing. You're defending something that has no evidence.
It's different from the other. Quantum mechanics says about a prism, which is a half-silvered mirror, that...
Well, prisms are not always half-silvered mirrors, so you're just confusing subjects here. We're talking about something that will split light, and you can have different mechanisms to split light in different amounts. Obviously, as I've pointed out, a single piece of glass will do an awful lot of splitting at a 45-degree angle.
In that situation, there is an intrinsic impossibility of aiming.
Again, it has nothing to do with aiming or impossibility of aiming. It has to do with the fact that I'm pointing out that the two beams clearly aren't equal. One beam gets diffracted by going through the empty spaces between the silver. One beam does not get diffracted. They both travel different distances, one diffracting the whole time, that is spreading the whole time, the other beam not spreading the whole time. That's the fact that you're ignoring, that it isn't making two equal beams. They're clearly not equal beams.
And therefore it conforms in a regular predicted way as quantum mechanics. There's never an issue of being able to inspect.
Well, why don't you tell me then? Why don't you make the direct assertion, okay? Again, you make no direct statements here. You're just making rationalizations for mumbo-jumbo, for vacuous statements, inspecific statements made that are clearly claim, they have every smell of a claim, yet no evidence of a claim. And again, wave-particle duality. It doesn't even mean anything. What the fuck is that? And here you are just making these vague assertions that somehow what they're doing is reasonable and well evidenced and completely logical and well supported when it's not. It clearly is just made up. It's a religion. It's just dogmatic in its proclamations. It doesn't bother with evidence. And I pointed out clear evidence of that, in that there's no logical consistency here at all. We know that the small slit has to cause Heisenberg effects. You're saying all of a sudden Heisenberg breaks down when it's in an interferometer. Why does an interferometer not do Heisenberg? The light has to spread more when you put it through the small holes. It has to do it. Clearly the two beams can't be equal. It's just a fact. And you're defending this horse shit.
such a constructed device, perhaps silvered mirror, it is not measuring most.
He just said that a laser beam is measuring. He just said that any device I make, I can't aim something because it's essentially measuring, and yet somehow we're not measuring when we put photons through tiny apertures. Amazing bullshit. Just how the fuck can I take you seriously? I'm trying to say, okay, this isn't a religious fanatic I'm talking to. He isn't a kook, right? I mean, he's not going to sit there and just lie and make defenses for complete horseshit. He's got to understand that evidence has to have some sort of magnitude to it. It has to have some sort of value. This is horseshit. You're showing up with fucking 1940s pictures of a cigar floating in space and telling me there's UFOs. This is horseshit. And what's your real assertion? What do you think happens? Do you think the beam that goes through the little holes spreads more than the beam that doesn't? Which one do you think is true? What is your opinion? What do you think is the true physical reality, fuckhead? That's what I want to hear out of your fucking gob so I can point out what an idiot you are. Make a claim, fucker. Assert something specific, jackass.
Most specifically, whereas external holes in a surface close together with a screen
aren't a measuring device. That's exactly what an interferometer is doing. They're little holes in a device confining the photons. It's exactly what they are. And the screen is eventually where the photon's going to end up. It's the same fucking experiment. Pretending it's somehow different is just bullshit.
And deciding whether to or not to, see which slot it goes through, etc., is most definitively measuring or potentially measuring and gets a different treatment by quantum mechanics.
Again, and there's nothing about the physical structure of the experiment that's different except that the little holes are going to be all kind of misshapen. They're not going to be perfect little rectangles. And your beam is bigger than all of them. Okay, so the beam itself is going to be projected. So yes, one of them is going to be a circular pattern versus being a bar pattern. But that's the only distinction.
So I think too many questions are thrown out by draft science.
Too many questions are thrown out by draft science. Just a horseshit statement. What the fuck could that possibly mean? I threw out a question somewhere. I didn't answer a question somewhere. What the fuck does that piece of shit statement mean? No, I haven't committed any crimes. You're the criminal. You're the one defending the frauds. I haven't committed any frauds. I haven't committed any deceptions. I haven't fucking cited fake evidence. I haven't done any of the crimes. You're just a lying sack of shit to say this has something to do with my fucking errors. No, it's your fucking mistake, asshole, that you're believing in a religion. An unevidenced religion.
Without iterating what he believes quantum mechanics says about the situation.
Well, I've said the word Heisenberg 7 million times. I mean, okay, that's an exaggeration. 1,000 times? 596 times I've said the word Heisenberg. I clearly understand the claims of fucking quantum mechanics. I've heard the word fucking entanglement. I know what the bullshit is, the statement. I know that the fucking evidence they have is this stupid, strangled experiments trying to detect tiny statistical differences in billions of photons, through an experiment where they're claiming I can throw a photon over here and catch it over here, the exact same photon. Stuff that, depending on technology that I think is way above their actual capacity. Just as I would claim their whole gravitational theory, wave theory, is a nice big pile of technology, but so misunderstood, and they preposterously make these claims that we can detect the thickness of a human hair on Mars. No, I think Alpha Centauri, actually. Fuck, you can.
And that isn't the metaphoric talking heads. That's the mathematics of quantum mechanics.
Again, there's no mathematics of quantum mechanics. Why don't you list the mathematics of quantum mechanics? Please, list me quantum mechanics in mathematical form. And show me how it's going to be something other than the Schrodinger equation, which has the presumption of cause in the equation. There's no way to derive the sine theta without their claims of cause.
What it says about the situation. And Inmendham has gone through a lot of series and a lot of talking head lay-type discussions.
They're not lay-type discussions. Most of them are formal lectures to students. They're educational videos, and that's exactly why they're, like I said, so bad, is because this is what people are taught. They're taught crap, and then they teach crap, and then they're taught crap and they teach crap, and they taught crap and they teach crap. And it's just a bad cycle of regurgitated bullshit.
Yeah, even some that, like his most recent one about Susskind and the two-slit, right, is the best lectures you'll see of Susskind.
So now he's making excuses. Well, this is one of his off lectures where he doesn't give a shit about the truth and he just says fluffy bullshit. I've played Susskind in formal student lectures, okay? I've certainly watched the ones he did on relativity and black holes. It's not subjects that I think are terribly interesting, frankly. But clearly when he was explaining how gravity works, that was a lecture to students. There's no difference between the lectures. The only difference is he doesn't do the math. But conceptually, you see right in your face what he believes.
That and this what I'm telling you
He's
about.
certainly making claims.
Even this is to a highly educated lay audience, right? Where he says it's the mathematics. You have to learn the mathematics.
So again, this is more horseshit. We're talking about the lay. There was nothing like that in the entire stuff I've been playing. There was just a lot of false citations to evidence that doesn't exist, and a complete misdescription of what single slits and double slits actually do. So he doesn't get the history right, he doesn't get the evidence right, and then he made up evidence.
The abstract mathematics. That's all there is to it, really.
Bullshit. This is just bullshit. The two-slit experiment is not the Schrodinger equation. That's just horseshit to say it is, that the equation explains explains anything. There's nothing. It's horseshit. There's no quantum mechanical math.
Later on, you might have intuitions that might help you to understand further concepts, but there's really...
Again, it has nothing to do with intuitions. It has to do with doing reasoning and figuring out ways to do experiments to demonstrate and prove, just as I did when I said, okay, well, if we can't detect a photon, maybe we can aim the photon. You find a solution. You find another way to demonstrate the cause for the effect. You find some way to gain some more information. You do the experiment a little bit different to find the information. As I pointed out with the radar experiment, you don't just point the two guns at the fucking antenna. All right? Because frankly, you should be able to make one out of a phase with the other one just by moving them different distances from the antenna. Very simple experiment.
Only the mathematics. We have to do the mathematics.
I mean, no one can claim wave interference, right? If the two antennas are shooting towards the center receiving antenna, okay, and if I move one of them and I move the other one, I'm going to put them out of phase. And so if I get an on-off pattern, by just moving one of the radar dishes, then I'll prove it's not wave interference. because the waves don't interfere with each other. They hit the antenna before they even know each other exists.
There are some, there are very few lectures of Susskind that are genuine.
So more just excuse making. So this is just such horseshit. Oh, he wasn't doing real physics. He was just doing, horseshit physics. He has his real physics book over there. If he really wanted to teach the subject, he would have gotten out his real book. I mean, this is just such bullshit. Oh, this is an insipid defense. An insipid defense of fraud.
Full-on academic lectures, because even when he
link me to a full-on lecture he did on the two-slit experiment. Then is it there? Is it somewhere his full-on lecture? I mean, this is just, you think he really has some other, he believes something entirely different than the lies he told that audience. He actually understands it completely better than that. That's not how he'd explain it to his kids. Yeah, I think it is how he'd explain it, because that's how he understands it, idiot. That's how fucking empty the evidence nest is. That's how bad the foundations of quantum mechanics are. All assumptions, all presumptions, all pronouncements, no fucking evidence.
Because, well, he's a very old man now.
Now he's making old man excuses. Some of these lectures are 10, 15 years old. So that's a horseshit excuse. Feynman's lectures are still there. He's dead. Does that mean his lecture is somehow different? No. This lecture is what he stated. What he thought at that time, that's what he was saying. And he was, again, getting the history wrong.
Pushing 80 or push past 80. He is no longer employed as a lecturer.
Either is Feynman, but again, so how does it change what he states?
It's my understanding, and I think he kind of I'm sure he is.
So how does this relate? Again, I didn't look to see how old the Stanford video is, but maybe it's 10 years old. So how does this crap about, well, he's getting dottery and senile, how does that have anything to do with the fact that he said it 10 years ago when he was still, working?
Employed and still receiving, it's not entirely benevolent, but it's almost benevolent. And he's just, he is employed insofar as, he is actively still part of the community and actively.
Yes, and he's saying more wacky, batshit, crazy stuff. So it's he might as well, just like Feynman. The older he got, the wackier his crap got. One electron is the only electron in the universe because it's just, it's popping in and out of existence and horse shit. Mathematics says that can happen. Then mathematics is retarded.
Contributing, but these aren't undergraduate lectures like Lewin gives, right?
So he's asserting that if he was teaching a classroom, he would do it differently. Bullshit.
Some of the lectures were undoubtedly, they're all...
Look, the guy from Yale is about as dry and all about mathematics, all about the math. All right, I played him misdescribing the history and doing the same bullshit. Oh, a single slit does this. Blob. No, it doesn't.
At the forefront, cutting edge of modern, whether you hold it in regard or not, what is called the cutting edge of theoretical physics. He gives lectures to these people, but they're kind of reminders and overviews for what is usually a larger portion of the audience
right, just link me to one professional physicist describing the single slit and double slit patterns, especially the two patterns of the double slit. Show me one professional teaching physicist doing it right. Show me one. Link me to the guy doing it right. One single one of them. And then tell me how your fucking quantum mechanics has integrity.
In fact, it's actually going out.
If not one of them can tell the right story, doesn't that mean that the story is shit? Not one of them can tell it right?
It's public consumption as well. But he refrains from in these kind of lectures on about when he talks about complexity theory, black hole entanglement and such. There's very
yeah. When the OJ lawyers are being real lawyers, they don't present fake evidence and they don't make crazy assertions and unfounded implications. No, they don't do any of that.
Little in the way of metaphor in those lectures. But the Stanford series that he's made on cosmology, particle physics, Newtonian mechanics, statistical mechanics, etc. These are all to actually a lay audience, where he promises to try to.
So again, this doesn't explain why the guy at Yale does it wrong, and Lewin does it wrong, and every other physicist I've ever found does it wrong. So again, show me one physicist doing it right. Show me. One.
Have it at the standard of undergraduate, without too much insulting metaphors, but I'm afraid...
All right, so this is just the same bullshit, okay? He's guilty of the same crime. He's citing evidence that he can't produce. He's saying, well, when Suskind's teaching the double slit accurately for real to students, he doesn't say this bullshit. He's not going to produce any evidence that he doesn't say this bullshit. He's just implying that it's a truth somehow, that somehow he has personal knowledge that Suskind's real lecture on the double slit experiment isn't a pile of crap. When he can't prove it, he doesn't have the experiment, he doesn't have the evidence, he's just making the assertion, the bold assertion with no evidence. He's guilty of the same fucking lying crimes.
Yes, they probably sometimes creep in. And given the fact that he begins by emphasizing the mathematical nature of the theory, well,
there's no mathematical nature of the theory. The theory is entanglement, Heisenberg, Huygens. That is the theory. So again, this lie that the theory is a mathematical equation, when no, the theory is a bunch of premises that make the mathematical equation mean something. The math can't do anything unless you have the fucking idiotic geometry of phase interference. So just lie some more.
Allowed that more than others because he often will speak of it. So this machine reports that there is such a theory and that the statistical...
Okay, so he's just reporting they have a theory. I ask him to tell me what he thinks, and he thinks they have a theory. Yeah, I know they have a theory, asshole. And I know what their theory is, asshole. And you've committed to nothing. You've explained nothing about what you think, what your reasoning capacity has made you conclude about what a photon is, what a field is, what has more evidence, what has less evidence, what seems more reasonable, what seems less reasonable. You've said absolutely fucking nothing.
There appears that, although I don't have it at hand, I'm taking at a word that there are many experiments, many hundreds, thousands of experiments which could all be said to conform to this.
Right, so they've told me so, and I believe them. They're more just nonsense. So I've pointed out how they can't even get the simplest experiment in physics. They can't describe it right. They can't describe it accurately. They can't describe the effect even accurately. And they just boldly speculate about causes without evidence. And he's going to cite much more complex experiments that essentially have experiments inside of experiments inside of experiments. They're so complicated, and he trusts them. Amazing bullshit. Alright, it's probably a good enough place to end. Fuck. Yeah, that's all to say. Fuck. Just what a pile of shit. Yeah, thanks for letting me know what you think. You think they have a theory and you think I have a theory. Wow. Your brain's really right on. You're real current. Shit.